Hi, everyone. Welcome to our G2I community event. This is a kickoff session that is launching our 6-month exploration of AI powered development, including tools like Cursor and more. And today we're going to hear from Eddie Freeman from our developer community at G2I about leveraging AI to keep up with the evolving AI landscape. And I'll share more about Eddie in just a moment. My name is Michelle Bakels. I am program director at G2I, focusing on developer health, so anything to support the mental and physical health of software developers. And I also organize React Miami Conf. If you're unfamiliar with G2I, which most of you are going to be familiar with G2I because you're part of our community here, but I know we have a few guests with us today. G2I's mission is to create custom talent pipelines so that our clients don't have to. We have a unique approach that combines customizable vetting, flexible terms, and tailored customer service that gives us an advantage. So whether you're hiring 1,000 engineers for complex AI projects or highly skilled individuals for an MVP, we can scale to those needs. And lastly, since G2I grew up in the open source ecosystem, we host our annual software developers conference, React Miami, in April, and all of those details are live now on reactmiami.com. So couple of rules of engagement for today. Eddie's going to be presenting his screen. He's going to be speaking for about a half hour. And while he's speaking, feel free to chime in the chat, leave your comments, leave your questions. You are welcome to chat with each other. Eddie's going to be focused on his presentation, so he might not see your chat until the end. But please feel free to discuss as we go through. Thea, who is behind the scenes, who most of you know from the community, she's going to be collecting your questions, and we're going to do a live Q&A at the end with Eddie. So at any point, please share your questions in the chat. There actually might even be like a separate tab for it. I'm not sure, but either way, Thea will collect those, and then we will answer them at the end. And so with that, I'm going to do a quick intro of Eddie. Eddie's a valued member of our G2I community. Earlier this year, he completed the AI engineer course that is created by Swix and Noah Hine. We have a link to that too. If anybody's interested in taking it as a member of the G2I community, you can actually get $300 off of that course with the code G2I. And so aside from that, Eddie has over a decade of software development experience and offers valuable perspective on how traditional developers can effectively navigate the AI landscape. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to you, Eddie. Please feel free to add anything to your introduction that you like and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. No, I mean, you covered it pretty well. I might have to skip a couple of slides as a result. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, thank you all for having me here. Let's go ahead and get into it. Right. So can everyone see my screen? Awesome. Right. So today we're going to talk about how to leverage AI to keep up with and understand AI. I know it sounds kind of wild and maybe meta, but part of it is also understanding how AI works and kind of what's out there and available to us as software engineers or builders. And that's kind of where Swix coined the term AI engineer. And I have a whole other talk that talks about the rise of that as well. But this is about my rise and how I kind of figured things out in the landscape. So let's dive in. Oh, there we go. So the best way to predict the future is to create it. And that's what we're going to try to like walk through here is how do we create the future that we want? So that way we have the best outcome for what AI can do for us as humans. And kind of to recap a little bit of what Michelle said, I've been around in software building things for over a decade. I have a lot of startup experience that kind of helped shape how I build, how I think. So I ship fast and I learn faster. I'm always trying to build things and iterate. And as Michelle said, I took a course earlier this year and took advantage of that $300 credit, which was made it more accessible for my own personal education, and it covered a lot of information around the ecosystem as well as some hands-on experience. So it was invaluable. In fact, Noah actually reached out and told me that there's a new cohort that I'm going to be able to get access to and continuously learn from them as they iterate on the course. So that's really great. And, to kind of go into what the AI ecosystem is looking like and kind of where we're at in things, we're just at the start of the curve. There's an overwhelming pace to AI advances. Just this week, NVIDIA's CEO, I think it was this week, announced Blackwell, which is like a whole system to basically deep dive into software 2.0, as he calls it, which essentially is like a machine creating the functions from multiple inputs to create more things. Like there's layers to software now that are shifting and are dynamic. Constant stream of new papers and research that's coming out of like how these LLMs are developing, and new tools and models are getting deployed or iterated on every month, if not every couple of weeks. Novel concepts and terminology, patterns, architectural changes to how we think and build software. There's just a lot, right? And that is because with every new technology, there is a technological S curve, all the way back from when the wheel was invented and how travel changed as a result, to the printing press, to the Industrial Revolution here in America and other places. Uh, every single time there is a change that happens that always shapes into an S curve, where the technology kind of settles down at the top there. Well, for AI, we're very close to the base, where the exponential growth is only accelerating. So, how do we keep up with this? Well, let's start by working smart, not hard, because, like I said, there's a lot of information. I don't know about you all, but I'm here to get things done and enjoy the existence I have as much as I can. So by leveraging AI to assist us in the growing onslaught of information, we can refine how we retain the information we're already consuming. So by using AI to process the AI news, we can get strategic about the information that we're filtering and build some automation so that way we don't have to think about it all the time. So how do we do this? Well, let's talk about it. But in order to talk about it and get into it, we have to at least understand a baseline of what the ecosystem looks like. So from a developer's perspective, right, we have uh, various pieces of information, like infrastructure, that we can leverage. Things that have been growing over time. Like you can see here in the green bar, this one in particular has a lot of very powerful tools that we can leverage that are built for AI and for leveraging LLMs. But on top of that, below that, there are various tools that we can leverage to help us fine tune the models that we're trying to leverage. There's platforms to help us compute and take large swaths of information. And then there's foundational models, which we'll mostly be touching the foundational models in this. Some of these other elements are more for like larger applications. But for us personally, to really leverage AI to support the ongoing onslaught of information, it's mostly going to be this foundational model and maybe a little bit of fine tuning if we really want to. That's more of us nerding out and being developers and trying to make things a little bit more fine tuned. But with those models, which ones should we use? Well, there are a slew of leaderboards that have risen up from the community to help us evaluate the models and how well they perform. You may have heard of like, ChatGPT o1 is the most powerful one that we've ever seen. And another example is the Cloud 3.5 Sonnet, blew away the OpenAI model recently this summer. And just real quick, oops, let's dive into that because I think it's valuable to see, just what these leaderboards look like. Can everyone see this? There we go. There we go. Yeah. So as you can see, they're ranking them, but they're ranking them on different criteria. So you can look at what's a context window, right? That's like the memory of a LLM. Then you have the overall performance versus how well it codes or how well it handles difficult prompts. And you can see how and these leaderboards shift all the time. So it's definitely valuable to understand, what they're reporting on and also what's out there. But going from there, we have kind of the essential pattern that we're going to need to have leverage for building our own tool, the agent. So what is an agent, and what are all these pieces to it, right? It's a typical architecture for any kind of system or service. At the center, there's the agent, the kind of the core pieces of it. It has memory. It has the ability to plan things. It has various tools, and then it has an action interface, places that it can, or kind of the actions that you want it to take, right? Um, for the most part, we actually have tools that, as I showed previously with the infrastructure, we have tools that allow us to abstract most of this long-term, short-term memory. Obviously, you can build it yourself. And then the planning side of things. So there are tools like LangChain, for instance, which was kind of on that baseline of the infrastructure. That if you wanted to build something quickly, that would be a path that you could take. Allows you to then organize things so that you are focused on building out the tools that you want that agent to be able to perform and defining those actions. So what does that look like in practice? Let's dive into that a little bit, so that way we can understand, what we want to accomplish with an agent. Well, for me, when I'm trying to process information, it's like, okay, uh, I want to build this tool. I want to build this. So let's leverage some tools for that. I personally like Cloud. Cloud 3.5 Sonnet has been giving me the best results. And as you saw on those leaderboards, I know I kind of went through them quickly, so maybe we can go back later. But those leaderboards showed Cloud very well, handled difficult prompts very well. And with any LLM or any model, what you give it improves the results in a lot of cases. And then once I finish kind of formulating an idea and structuring things with Cloud, I jump into Cursor. And one of the reasons why I've really enjoyed that is, first off, I was in the VS Code world for a very long time. I worked in React Native, built web applications, went to the back end, built infrastructure as well. And very quickly, Cursor allowed me to jump into an ecosystem that was quicker, had first-class citizenship with AI tools, and really accelerated my ability to create things. All right, so I built the agent and thought through, okay, what's the reasoning process that this agent needs to have to create the things that I want it to do? How do I want it to leverage those tools? Well, once I figured that out, I needed to understand and defined at least the baseline of the tools. I had to create them. So, I wanted this agent to create a report of all the things that have changed in AI news from disparate sources. And from that report, I wanted to cite the sources so that way if I wanted to follow up or reference them again or dive deep into it, I could. And then I had to integrate that with all the different sources that I wanted. Um, and that actually leveraged or helped or directed me to finding another tool called Fabric. It's an open source project that has various patterns of how you might prompt. Um, Allows you to go in and transcribe a YouTube video very quickly and pull out snippets of information. And then the last bit was, how am I going to use this information? Well, do I want to create a report of the different changes for the leaderboards, for instance? What's the top model for a particular category that I'm interested in? And then I live in Obsidian for my second brain. All my note taking happens there, and I try to organize my information there. So to kind of recap, we have various tools that we've collected over the journey. We've got Claude, which I personally enjoy because of the way that it communicates back. The organization that Anthropic has built for uh, the way that it communicates back to you. And you can add system prompting in their web client as well. You can organize things by projects, which allows you to create multiple chats. So the context windows don't get overly big, allowing you to be more refined with how you're asking questions and organizing things. It also has the ability to add uh, context to the project as a whole. So if you want the model to always know about certain things, it allows you to do that, which I think is really powerful. Cursor, right? Like I said, I mean, you can plug in AI development for now a lot of different IDEs, but I found this to be one of the more effective and also one of the quickest. It's also very lightweight. Like I haven't had any issues being able to run it. Pardon me. And then, um, and yeah, like it's been very, very, very effective and just accelerating how well I can build. Fabric. Fabric was one of those tools I kind of discovered through browsing for things that would help me automate and help me connect the AI tools that I wanted to. And it has a strong community around building prompts that are very robust and able to do different things. So like you can even contribute back to it. It's fully open source, and that's really powerful and easy to set up. Apologies. And then if you haven't like tried to transcribe audio with AI, sometimes it can take a while. And then I found this open source project called Insanely Fast Whisper. And locally, you can process audio. So, rather than spending for hours and hours of tokenization and AI or LLM model time, you can sit it on your computer and have it run Fast Whisper to process those audio files. And lastly, Obsidian for my knowledge management, just keeping track of everything, insanely great. So with all of that, build the future you want to see. I think it's incredibly important with everything changing in the world. It's important that we stay active, informed, and create the environment that we want. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of solar punk, but this is one of those images that always kind of inspires the imagination. Oops, sorry, there we go. And I think one of the things that's fun to understand is just how expensive and incredible the work that's going into AI is. It took yeah, a lot of GPUs. I mean, this is why NVIDIA is really doing well right now. 248 A10 8100 GPUs to train a llama, which is what Facebook built. And that was each GPU cost 15K, which is something like $30 million if you want to train at that scale. So all these foundational models that we're able to leverage, and it's only getting more expensive because of the amount of information that we're piping in, and also just like how we're refining things. Um, some of the indicators for those models is like with there's like 8B, right? That's 8 billion tokens. And tokens are just like bits of information that are used to process the information. Yeah, so Llama 65B, right? And 33B were trained on 1.4 trillion tokens. And 7B is the smallest model trained on 1 trillion tokens. So the concept of how much information is being processed is incredible. With that, does anyone have any questions? Obviously I'm open to going back and reviewing some of the other information that I kind of maybe went a little quick over. Oh, sure. Yeah, so Ben Ryan asked, can you talk a little bit more about how I moved from web apps to AI? Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that I did was take that course. But before that, I had been playing around with different things, trying to see how easy it was to integrate the AI into applications I was already building. So one of the things that I started with was exploring the different patterns, right? So like the agentic pattern is one that you can actually get from OpenAI and from like LangChain and other tools like that. Um, Built-in agent patterns that you can write in TypeScript or JavaScript that fully integrate into web applications. So if you want to just dip your toes and not think about all the different pieces yet, that's one way to start. Is you have kind of a baseline of understanding of what those agentic patterns are. Start building the tools, and then leverage the tools that the agent needs, and then leverage the existing frameworks out there. But that's kind of how I started. I started just playing around with the different things that I knew that were out there.
All right, I think we have another question. Are you able to hear me, Eddie?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So for anybody in the chat here, there's either the Q&A tab or the chat tab. You can add your questions. Either way, we'll be able to see them. But another question that we have, which is a very popular discussion right now, actually, is how do you see all of this AI evolution forcing developers to deliver code much faster and possibly leading to FOMO, anxiety, and burnout?
I mean, that's a great question. I personally see not so much. I think it's about how you set expectations, right? For myself, I leverage AI in my day-to-day as a developer to assist me in debugging and learning new concepts. I think that's kind of where the evolution of AI is heading. OpenAI just launched AI search, and that's competing directly with Google, right? Previously, developers would go to Stack Overflow, developers would go to like Google searching and like try to look up errors that were happening or things like that. What's really fascinating, and this comes with a great insult and validation of what the AI responds with, because we still have AI that responds incorrectly of how to solve a problem, right? So I think that's where the value of a developer comes in and kind of your skill set. However, there is value in the fact that AI sometimes will identify things very quickly and then explain to you why those things are incorrect, or maybe identify with some guidance, even identify where things are invalid. And it has context of APIs that exist. And if you give it even more context of like, the tools that you're using, and things like that, it does a lot for you to organize those, what might be going wrong. From like a FOMO and anxiety and burnout, I think leveraging AI is definitely something that a lot should be looking at, if you haven't yet. Just because, like I said, we're at the early stages of the curve, and it's going to be a wild ride regardless. Um, and if business people are coming at you saying like, oh, let's leverage AI and move quicker, right? I think it's give them the security concerns, right? These contexts, and like these public models are oftentimes training off of the data that you submit to it. There are, legalese that talks about not using some data if you pay for it or something like that. But in all reality, there's a very good chance that they can still use it. So if business people are coming at you being like, hey, use AI, build faster, ship faster, push back. We're not ready yet for all of it to come super fast. And it is coming fast. But that's I think how we can manage those expectations is pushing back, telling them that like, hey, or telling people that, hey, AI is powerful, it can be helpful, but with a grain of salt, right? Let's leverage it to help ourselves, and see it as a tool, but let's not rely on it, because that's not going to be, at least for a while, kind of how we do things.
Yeah, I think that's a good perspective, Raphael. This question it comes up in a lot of discussions around AI, and I think if I could like add my thoughts in here too about FOMO, anxiety, and burnout. Um, I think about a commercial that I saw on YouTube from the 80s. It was an IBM commercial, and it was basically like promoting the personal computer in the workforce. And the whole context of the commercial was that now that we have these personal computers in our offices that can speed up our work, which is essentially was like spreadsheets, is kind of what they were like advertising. Now this man was able to go home and have dinner with his family and able to eat with his family without his food being cold. And then fast forward a few decades, and we still are facing the same problem with the same desires that we want to spend more time with our families. We want to have more of a personal life. We want to have a better separation between work and our lives. And so I think that these AI tools can be very powerful and accelerate our work. But I think when it comes to things like FOMO, anxiety, and burnout, I think those are actually more cultural than
Mhm.
technological. And so I think it's, still up to us in some circumstances to delineate when we are going to stop working or when we're like, this is enough for the day, and kind of manage that ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's like an organizational culture that could be even just like a workplace culture. 100%. No, I think that's a great perspective as well. Just like looking at history, like this has always been kind of an issue as technology advances. Things are going to evolve, and there's going to be like this excitement early on, and then it becomes day to day, where it becomes very normal to use spreadsheets. And now most people hate spreadsheets. So like, there might be a turning point where AI tools are going to be similar, which
Yeah.
segues into Oliver's question.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll read that one next. And also if I'll try and find that YouTube commercial. I'll share it in the G2I chat if I find it. But Oliver asked, I tried several AI code assistants, Codium, Copilot, and recently Cursor. I still find it very noisy during dev. It actually distracts more than it helps. And the code quality is quite often not that good as I want to have it. Usually I end up reviewing more than actually writing, which does not raise my productivity significantly. What's your take on that?
I mean, it's a very fair point.
Mm.
One of the things that I think is helpful about those code AI assistants or coding assistants um, is doing the mundane stuff that most developers hate doing, which is documentation. But that helps you be a better team player. So that's what I've actually leveraged it the most for. And sometimes when I get stuck on a problem, I'll like ask AI to review the code and just like I'll give it a code snippet and say like, hey, what's wrong with this function? Can you give me some ideas? And from that, it helps at least bifurcate into a couple of different options of like, okay, maybe I missed something here, or my brain's tired, or something like that, right? Well, AI's brain's not going to get tired, so one of the benefits there is that at least it helps you kind of spawn ideas. But I do agree that a lot of times the code quality or even sometimes the valid paths that it presents isn't always correct. And that's why we're still valuable as developers. So I think, your skills from that of being able to critique, like code review is a very powerful skill to have. I think it's underrated in a lot of ecos or like teams. But like that's what separates you from being a very good senior developer to a junior is being able to review code and evaluate it for correctness and efficiency and optimization. Um, so yeah, I mean, personally, I think code reviews are going to be the way of the future in terms of being able to generate code from AI. So, develop those skills. It's also helping you communicate better, right? Because you're communicating with an AI assistant and the better you communicate to that AI assistant, the better quality the code will be. Because if you give it very clear requirements, it'll give you better code most of the time. And this is kind of where it comes down to the model, right? So those leaderboards really help you identify which models are doing really well for like coding, for harder prompts, for creative writing, for instance. There's a whole leaderboards dedicated to emotional intelligence, where the model is like able to understand like uh, emotions in word, in the written word. Um, Understand is, I guess, I think a loose way of describing it, but it's very much, it depends on, I guess, the tools that you explore. And again, prompting, communication, and your skills as a developer are going to play into what you get out of a tool. So I think I agree that they're not perfect. And that's more of an application development, right? So the teams that are building those tools are constantly trying to improve those products to not be intrusive, to be helpful, right? That's their intention, is to be helpful, to accelerate development. And those products are just a little immature, right? They're early in their stages. Like a lot of these products that are getting out into the market are very like just in the last year. I mean, here, let's go to this real fast. This one right here. Oh wait, no, actually, I have a whole other chart that's just the AI startups that are leveraging those tools. So like and by the way, I have all these charts are from like VC firms. So they do a deep dive into a lot of the things that are out there, the ecosystem and how it's evolving. Great way to keep up on things, which actually kind of leads into another question someone was asking. But yeah,
Love
uh,
that. Yeah, Oliver added some context. Thanks for the answer. Exactly what I'm doing. Only use it for trivial things which are boring and potentially ask if I need some more inspiration to solve a problem. Great to hear that you act similar. Nevertheless, if I don't feel comfortable with a language, I can see great value in these assistants, which speed up learning tremendously. I agree. This reminds me of a quote. I think Swix said it, but I might just be misattributing this. But it was like something along the lines of like AI is the best it's ever been and the worst it will ever be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. And like
So,
I wasn't super strong with Python when I started diving into AI, just because like that was the language that was being taught for the course. And then Fabric is built in Go. But
mm,
so diving into that open source code, I've dabbled in Go a little bit here and there. My sister is very good at it. But uh, I've never really touched it. So when I need explanations, the AI can actually help me break down like what these functions are used for, what the syntax is, things like that, because it's been trained to do that, especially models that are specific to coding or been fine-tuned for coding. So I think what Oliver brought up there is great because like that's exactly what you should be using AI for. Accelerate your learning, like don't be afraid to play around with code and languages that you're not familiar with because you can literally translate a function from one language to another with an AI model today. And generally it will work.
yeah, love it. Okay. Next question. I'm gonna jump. Oh, okay. The page just jumped off. Okay. So what sources do you find most reliable for staying current with AI, and how do you decide which among those tools you should adopt?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, uh, I didn't get a chance to finish writing together like all the different curated sources that I currently use. I've got a couple of podcasts. Swix is a great resource. They have something called they have and I'll share this with the slides, but they have a newsletter called Latent Space, which basically is kind of an extension of their podcast. Um, that goes deep into AI ecosystem, talks to these experts, people that are in the research, building the models, developing concepts, designing patterns. So like the kind of the foundational folks. So that's a great resource in itself. Um, I think and then on top of that, on YouTube, again, Swix is kind of trying to make their their brand is kind of now the AI engineer. So YouTube, right? There's a bunch of YouTube channels that are great for keeping up with the AI news. I'm a big fan of the AI engineer from Swix again. But I have a couple of others. I'll try to list them out because I don't have them off the top of my head. But yeah, like I think it's again testing out the tools yourself, uh, seeing the community like excitement around it is one way that I kind of evaluate it. And then it just kind of depends. Like I tried LangChain previously and had problems with it because I didn't fully understand how to use it at the time. Then I took the cohort, tried it again. I'm like, oh, this all makes sense now because I've learned the terminology. So I think that's kind of where you start is you start by learning some of the terminology, which I also have like an entire presentation that kind of goes through that. Um, so I can definitely make a list and share that with the community at some point. But that's again, I think also why this report that I generate, where the concepts change or like a new one comes out, someone's talking about something on one of those podcasts. Um, that I think is one way to just keep up with it, and that way you start building a glossary, right? Of what concepts are out there, what's being talked about. What the heck is an eval, right? That's an example. What's clip? Clip is an architecture for like processing images in a model. I didn't know that until I started playing around with it. So I think that's kind of where you start. So again, AI can be really helpful. Literally, you can ask this like similar question to AI, and it's if you give it some structure, it'll spit out a bunch of stuff, and then you can go and validate and be like, okay, actually, this is really interesting. And then that's an evening, right? You spend an evening basically just learning about, how to explore this stuff. Um, but it's really fascinating once you get into it because it's quite, yeah, it's quite an interesting topic.
Yeah, there's a lot happening right now in the space too. There's a lot of things being announced. This question in your answer kind of reminds me of a Twitter exchange I saw. a little while ago. I'm chronically online, by the way, so there's a Twitter point of reference for almost everything in my mind. But there's this tweet from Guillermo Rauch, the Vercel CEO, and he wrote like, "Try every new technology and try them immediately yourself. Doesn't mean you have to adopt or love every new product, but having an inaccurate mental model of the world can be very damaging." And then someone replied, "Anyone else find this tiring AF? I think there's value in staying cool and calm and collected and seeing what sticks. Constantly keeping up with stuff that will be replaced in 3 months, maybe for your specific niche, but in general, I don't know." And then Guillermo wrote back, quote unquote, "Try can be 5 minutes and you always learn something interesting," which is what I agree with too. I think even just checking something out for a few minutes builds your context for the space more than I think that 5 minutes has like exponential returns. And so it's worth just even seeing the product. What do these products look like? Even if you know exactly how they work. Um, so yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, and I think that plays into what I said closer to the end of my
Yeah.
answer, which is you can ask the question to AI. My wife does this for her business. Like, she's learning things of like how to run her business better. And she'll ask questions, and then if she's like, I still don't get it, or I don't know if this is true, let me go research. But like with that question to the AI, you at least now have potentially a context that you could
Hmm.
start from. And if you're like, I'm fascinated to learn more about this, you can splinter off and go and do your own research. And, it starts with that 5 minute beginning that then can turn into an evening of you just dove in and expanded your context window to some extent.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Okay. So this is a fun one from Lewis. Tools like Stack Overflow are full of creative and correct solutions for developer platforms. LLM tools use tools like Stack Overflow as a source of information, but we cannot or we don't feed the LLM directly.
Mhm.
Sometimes the LLM tool gives some wrong information and we are forced to come to a solution ourselves. And the solution is not shared with the community unless it's accessible from Git or something like that. Do you think that LLM tools will reduce overall creativity in coding, given that they will be limited to sources such as Stack Overflow and the traffic in Stack Overflow is diminishing?
I mean, I think it's a
Wow.
fair point. Yeah, that's like going to be deep because like this is essentially a kind of continental shift in the developer ecosystem that's happening, right? We have titans of like the developer community, like Stack Overflow, that are waning to some extent if they don't adopt or adapt, I should say. And so I think to your point, yes, LLMs can be isolating to some extent in terms of like not building that community and not always correct, as you're saying. Um, but that's going to, I think, evolve over time. And, like I was saying in my talk, build the change you want, right? If there isn't a Stack Overflow like community system that leverages these LLM tools, we should build it. Like that's a startup idea right there. Because I mean, yes, maybe Stack Overflow will adopt AI and start leveraging it and build their own like foundational model off of all their data that developers can then use and leverage and stay active within a community, share their solutions that they come up with, um, after maybe having a conversation with LLMs. One of the challenges I think Stack Overflow has in terms of that community is, the time it sometimes takes for someone to answer when a developer is oftentimes trying to find a solution right there. So I think that's kind of where the gap is being filled by LLMs and like these tools like Cloud and ChatGPT and others, is that immediate assistance, right? That ability to like not have to wait. I mean, honestly though, like there's problems with that too, right? Where it's like, oh, we don't have to wait, we don't have to take a moment and step back and think more. I think that also has its value. So um, I agree that like there's a potential if we are not vigilant that we'll lose our creativity in development. Um, that said, we're also hopefully becoming better communicators. We're still being creative and like how we approach. It's just a shift in syntax of coding language to how we describe the problem and like the potential solution that we want, right? Because I may have a solution in my head of how I want it to be developed, but I don't know how to like code it, right? Either it's because I don't know the language well enough, or I'm using a new framework, or a couple other factors could play into that. But you can still ask an LLM, hey, I have this idea for solution to a problem I'm having. Here's the problem. Here's the potential solution. Walk me through like pros and cons of the solution to the problem, and write up maybe some code samples that I can test out, right? Because a lot of the LM tools that we have out there right now don't run the code in the browser or like in the tool that they have, right? Which is a safety tool. So you still have to test that solution. You still have to validate it. So I think there's some value there, and yeah, build the future you want, right? If there's not a tool that plugs with LLMs that builds compute community as well, let's build it.
Love it. Thank you for that answer. Um, okay, so next question that we have. In my current job, we tried Greptile and Tragbot to help out on PR reviews. The latter can be helpful sometimes, but it seems that these tools are still very inaccurate. Do you think in the future they could actually do this PR review task instead of a human?
I mean, there's always that potential, right? I think there's that like even within the LLM model development, there's tools and or sorry patterns where it requires human intervention, right? Because we're training the model, we're trying to make it smarter, we're trying to make it better in some way, shape, or form, and there's always a human element in the loop. So I think uh, an example that I saw with the most recent like AI summit from the AI engineer group in San Francisco was a company that essentially had this agentic like duplication pattern. So if you wanted to perform a task across, 1,000 repos, for instance, like let's say you wanted to update your analytics interface, rather than having to deprecate and then slowly but surely, make changes to each of those repos, they created the task, they organized it with one like staff engineer, organized the requests, like validated the solution, and then replicated it, and created pull requests to all of the 1,000 repos to make those updates within those repos, using like a splintering agentic pattern, right? So a bunch of agents, AI agents, went off and basically made those code changes and created a PR request, um, or a pull request. And I think that's kind of where I'm seeing at least the LLMs going today, in terms of like being able to scale our effectiveness. I think PR reviews are still there's definitely some element that AI is, I think, going to be helpful with, but it's evolving, right? I don't think it's there yet. It still needs some human intervention to make sure that the code quality is good, and it might help the reviewer evaluate the code and be able to speed up their time in reviewing. But yeah.
Nice. Yeah. All right. So, next question from Fazil. Have you tried Anthropic Claude or GPT-o1 preview?
I've tried both. Um,
Thoughts?
yeah, so I'm still a fan of Anthropic Claude. Like they did a release, I think, to keep up with some of the changes that O1 Preview put out. I actually just got an email yesterday that I got access to the API of the next iteration of O1, which is exciting. So I'll probably be tackling that sometime, maybe over the holidays, so that for me in America, it's Thanksgiving next week. So uh, I'll get some time to play with that. Um, but yeah, I personally still like Anthropic Claude. I think they're doing a really good job in how they're approaching things, like their philosophy behind it. Um, uh, but yeah. Who knows? That's kind of why I keep up with the leaderboards. Like, who knows? Maybe next week that'll change. And that's actually, like, I think, a good tip. Uh, you can pretty easily swap out these models to any of your application, unless you've fine-tuned it in some way. That takes some effort. But yeah, like, if like I just swap API keys and it switches between the two. So if I get the results I want from Claude, awesome. If I don't, well, let's try a one. Let's see if that works.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so this is the last question that I see so far. We do have the time booked to the end of the hour. So that means we have about 9 more minutes left. If we end early, we end early, but if you do have another question, try and get it in as soon as you can because we're going to be ending soon. So Joaquin has a question. If you are able to share, how do you use AI at your job from day to day, and would you recommend switching from VS Code to Cursor?
Yeah, so the cursor switch is relatively recent. I've mostly used it for personal projects. But I did use Codium and Copilot prior to that in VS Code, and it was interesting. Like, I think the difference between Copilot and Codium was very stark. So, and that's mostly of like a product flow, right? Oftentimes they had similar features, like, oh, you can prompt it in a chat window, or you can, like, select a piece of code and say, like, hey, give me the documentation for this code, or can you add some comments to this so it's easier to follow later? Things like that. Or explain to me this code, right? If it's a new piece of the project that I haven't explored, which also goes into some of the use cases that I leverage AI for. Sometimes I'll even go into Claude and say, let's say I'm having an issue debugging a problem, or getting into an area that I'm a little bit fuzzy on. I'll ask questions to Claude. I have, like, dedicated chats and projects for the different things I'm working on. So, I play tabletop role-playing games as well. And in my day-to-day, I'll have the Claude be a creative writing partner when I'm doing, like, different stories and things like that. And one of the things I like about Claude in particular is the fact that they allow you to put system prompts in really easily. I think OpenAI can learn from that, because that allows you to essentially very quickly spin up your own custom chat or GPTs, which I know is available in their system, but I think it's a little bit more heavy-handed in terms of, like, how they productized it. Um, I think that answers kind of the day-to-day stuff as well, but
Yeah, I think like my perspective on this is why not? I mean, if your company doesn't have any issue with you trying Cursor, like why not? Because it is VS Code really like you can you can switch over unnoticeably, use it exactly the same way as you would your traditional IDE, which is such a funny term to say, by the way, now, traditional IDE. Um, but you could use it the same way, right? And then you can like layer in kind of like which benefits you start taking advantage of first. And that was definitely like my play. Like I was using Cursor for months before like I unlocked that true real productivity boost because it was like habit breaking for me more than anything. Like I think I was using Cursor for months in a way in which if I got to the point where I would go to Stack Overflow, then I would use the cursor tools. Like when I got stuck, I would use the cursor tools. And then at some point, when I was working on the React Miami website, I was like, why don't I just prompt it to write my layout? Like I know how to write a layout, but this is like tedious and I hate writing a layout, like designing one. So why don't I just prompt it and see what happens? And then my brain switched completely the opposite direction. Like, let me focus on making it do mundane work instead of like the really tough stuff. And then I have more energy to think about the really tough stuff. And then from there, it went from, yeah, like the inline editor to the chat to the full on compose feature where you're editing multiple files at a time. So you can layer it in, but yeah, it's a pretty easy switch if you're allowed to at your job. Why not?
I think
Um,
that's a good point. Yeah, like, one of the things that my company has concerns around is security of like personally identifying information like in the code base, which if you're writing your code well for production, it's already sanitized. So like that PII and the intellectual property, should be relatively safe. But if you have like an algorithm that you're working on that's proprietary, don't leverage the AI tools for writing that. Because I think that's where your company is going to be the most concerned about. And again, it's I think policies around AI, and that's again where the product that FOMO question earlier, like security is a big concern around these AIs. So
Mm.
that's kind of think where you can still have that conversation if you need to.
All right, we have time for one more question, and then I'll make a little note. But what do you prefer, Claude Web UI or the API?
Um, Yeah, so I mean, I've leveraged the web UI plenty for different things, which I think is really powerful. I think the API I've used for the tools like Fabric, for instance. The cost difference is there too. So like, each time that you use these APIs, it's based upon tokens, like how many tokens it needs to generate and that sort of thing. So you can definitely optimize around that. Whereas the web UI is, a set price every month, right? So I think that's also a consideration when you're leveraging these tools. Um, the You're still hitting the same model, and you can still set system prompts and you're still defining your prompts for the API. So in a lot of ways, you can structure things similarly from the web API if you wanted to within your project. Um, but the benefit of the API too is that you can plug it into Cursor. So like you can plug in into Fabric, you can plug it into Cursor, so you can still use the same models for all of your tools if you wanted to. It just kind of depends on how you want to leverage it. I don't think I have a preference between the two. I just use them depending on the use case.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So Drazen had a note here. I joined a little bit later, but didn't hear anything in the a presentation for building a sustainable system for monitoring AI developments and connecting tools like Cursor to your existing workflow. But Thea responded that it was touched on. And as she mentioned here, this is part of a 6-month series. So this is our kickoff. This is kind of like the introduction session that we have. Also, if you were joining a little bit late, all of these sessions are going to be recorded. So we're going to upload these to our YouTube channel for G2I, and we're going to make a playlist for all of these sessions so that you can watch them all together in a row. And then I would say that Eddie is a part of our G2I community. So if you're in our Slack and you're a G2I developer and you want him to go into more depth on this, I would say like let's talk about it in the community channels and keep the conversation going. And also, this would be really helpful for us, for Thea, myself, our developers that are consulting on this to put together our future programming over the next 6 months too, to hear what you really want us to dig deep on. So please, let's continue the conversation and keep that going. I wanted to give you the opportunity, Eddie, to share any last thought. It can be like a note, it can be a quote, it can be some wisdom, it can be a dad joke, whatever you want.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, I think one of my favorite quotes is from Arthur C. Clarke. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indiscernible from magic. What we're dealing with is that we're approaching the realm where what these technologies are able to do is create magic for us. So let's go out there and add some more magic into the world.
I love that. Great last thought. So thank you again, Eddie, for joining us, sharing all of this, and being a part of our developer community. And thank you to everybody who joined us today. This has been a blast and a great discussion, great presentation. And we will see you at the next one. Ciao. Bye.